my name is Taskia Liaquat, and I'm currently working as audit senior in one of the top 20 audit firms over here in the UK. I actually just recently moved from Saudi Arabia. I was working there in a non-big four firm. So I shared my experience also before in like the similar video you're stating about how was my experience about how I got the job offer, how anybody else could also find out these things. So I'm happy to help as well today.
Thank you very much. So what we want to explore today is you got a job offer. Now the time is about sponsorship, your IELTS, and there are some other requirements as well. So can you just briefly touch upon requirements, and then we can deep dive into each of those?
Absolutely. So if you've gotten a job offer, the most important next documentation is the number one would be your confirmation of sponsorship, which would be the cost that your employer from the UK itself would be sending you. Without that, you cannot apply for the visa. That is one of the most critical documentation that you need. Besides that, for the employee himself, what documents they would need is going to be IELTS or any other documentation which could prove your level of English language. You're going to require some sort of maintenance bank statement, which could be an option that could be avoided if your employer actually, when issues the cause, says that they're going to be covering that aspect as well. But that's something quite detailed and a bit complex, and it's not the same for every company or firm. The third thing would be making sure that all your legal documentation are in order. That could be your passport, if we talk about in terms of audit firms, your professional qualifications and all those other aspects which are actually going to prove that you are going on a legible job and you have that required level set of skills and educational level as well, which will ensure the authority itself that you're going to be given the recommendation and you're going to be given the visa. And other than that, there are a few other smaller things as well. Like I said, your passport would be there, and other some legal documentation which are not that critical to your application, but if you're able to provide them, they would be really helpful.
All right, thank you so much for the overview. Now let's deep dive into some of the specific elements. Number one being a sponsorship certificate. Now, what do you think is the documentation that you provide to the firm to actually provide allow them to provide you with a sponsorship certificate, like passport or any other details that you have to initially provide?
Absolutely. So firstly, your passport is your most critical thing. It should be valid at least for more than 6 months. The next thing would be your proper proof of address, which could be the current residence you have. You could even provide your current employer or any other address that you believe could be valid. That is quite critical. For that, maybe you might be required to give your proof of contract, or maybe if it's your own property, so sort of those documentation. There is also documentation regarding confirming your prior employment, because they sometimes also write down what your status is in a particular country. Now, in my case, because I was working in Saudi Arabia on the sponsorship or the residency of the company, so I had to also provide that documentation to show I can actually apply for the visa from that particular country. So these are the three documents which really are important when your firm is going to apply for the confirmation of sponsorship on your behalf.
Cool. And how long does it take for sponsorship certificate to be generated by the firm?
On the lowest level, as early as possible, it could come out within 2 working days. But on average, what the usual cases I have seen is it either takes 2 weeks or 1 month. If you have some complications or there's some backlogs in the firm itself, multiple calls are being processed, so it could take more than 1 month. But on an average, 2 weeks is something that you can wait up for it.
Awesome. Just a bit more about, I guess, certificate of sponsorship for anybody who's doing. So the process has changed since last few years. In past, firms did not have allocated number of sponsorships available to them. The system is different now. You know how many papers you can sponsor each year. You can easily allocate certificate of sponsorship yourself. Historically, firms used to apply certificate of sponsorship the first week of each month, and then you had to wait for 1 month, which has been quite different now. You can just generate a COS now. Other things that are typically within this certificate of sponsorship is, of course, your name, your details, all the address and everything, the job type, the job occupation code, and some other details that are pretty much relevant. And those will actually be relevant when you are filling your own job application or visa application after receiving the certificate of sponsorship. So those details need to match with what you are typing inside your visa application. That's something we will be touching upon later as well. But it's the most important document requirement for your job application. A sponsored visa is incomplete without your COS. I mean, it's just the
Absolutely.
essence of that. But now, looking at the other requirements, so there's a requirement of course, IELTS. Now you mentioned that, of course, there's the leeway from that as well. If you have the kind of a degree or certification where you can prove that you have English ability. So can you give a bit more highlights on that, like what in exactly how can we avoid IELTS, or even if we're doing IELTS, what score we need?
Absolutely. So for IELTS, specifically because you're applying for the UK skilled worker visa, you need to give the IELTS for the UK VI. There has been some issues in the past that individuals have actually just given the normal UK,
Yeah.
just the normal IELTS that was generalized.
Yeah.
But for specifically for the visa application process, you're required to give general IELTS for UK VI. So that's something you can easily, if you go on any website, you go for ITP, British Council, you'll find out that, okay, this is the one particular.
Just to interrupt,
For,
I guess UK
yeah.
visa is also applicable for every other country, but the general IELTS is not applicable for UK visa.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That even if you could have you could have more score than the required level, they would still not accept it, because for specifically for the UK skilled worker visa, you would require for the UK
Yeah.
VI. The average skill levels actually it varies a bit, because if you're going towards medical field or healthcare, it's different. But on an average, you need to have scores above 6 band. But again, if you're going towards an educational sort of sector, the scores are slightly varying. So for that, if you're not clear on what specific levels you need, you can easily visit the website and you'll be able to find out all the relevant scores you need in each of the band area.
Yeah.
But if besides the IELTS, there is another option, that is your degree. Now, because I'm an ACC qualified member, and plus I had the bachelor's degree from the Oxford Brookes University that was in pathway with the ACCA, I was not required to give the IELTS, because both of these degrees and the professional qualification were from the UK itself. They've issued from the country, and it clearly stated that these were taught in the language of English.
Mm-hmm.
The median of the classes, the courses, and the exam was based in English level.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever get a chance, do look at the level, the letter of equivalency from the ACCA portal. It clearly states that this actually letter, if you were to assess your degree transcript and all the documentation that you can get from ACCA, it will be equal to a master's level degree. And you won't be required to get any sort of confirmation from any of the language institutes that this is equal to this level of not. So if you're able to provide your ACCA transcript and your bachelor's degree transcript, provided if it is the Oxford Brookes one or any other online degree, or maybe the degree that you've done within the UK itself, and it states that, okay, that the language is English, you would be able to save yourself time from giving the IELTS.
Just to confirm, so the documents you have to give is there's nothing else than your actual degree or certificate. There's no certificate. You know, there's some bodies which verify your transcript like that. So there's no such requirement. You need to just give whatever was taught to you in English language, be it UK degree, etc.
Absolutely. So the documents that I gave was my ACCA transcript, my ACCA membership, letter of equivalency. For the OPU, I just gave the transcript, nothing else, not even the degree that you're awarded or the letter of equivalency for it. So for the Oxford Brookes University bachelor degree, I just gave them the transcript itself.
Yeah, I'm for viewers, it's probably advisable to give as many documents as possible and not really missing anything. You know, putting the certificate in and missing transcript, then you're just, missing some chances, like somebody might question you. So just give everything you have in that. And I think on the IELTS, I don't know the exact band side now, but historically for me, I think it was band 4 that was required for tier 2 visa, and band probably 7 for the student level candidates. It can change, of course. There has been a lot of changes since I came in UK. It's always worthwhile looking on the visa website. Now, the other job requirements being, then we talked about sponsorship, we talked about IELTS, then of course there's a TB. I don't think you went through that requirement of TB screening, but it's definitely in a lot of
because there are
countries.
few countries that are in the list. So because Saudi Arabia was exempt from it, so I was not required. But if you have lived in certain countries, like from our background, like Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, or some other countries like this, for more than 6 months, you would be required to give the TB test then.
Yeah, and I think for the viewers, it probably takes 1 day to get the appointment and get the TB test done. At least in Pakistan, not sure about India. So it's quite a quick one. You just need to book an
Yeah,
appointment with the relevant provider
absolutely.
as well. The other bits around the job itself. Now, the firm does carry out its own check. Apart from doing the sponsorship, they need to make sure you are the right candidate. They need to make sure you have the right your experience is legit. You don't have any history of criminal records or anything like that, and your qualification is kind of legit. So they do the security checks as well. So can you just kind of reflect a bit on security checks as well, like what happened, what they asked for, any referrals they wanted to cross verify from your old employer, etc.
So there were three things. For the educational aspect, I had to give them all the degrees or any certificates or letter I had. So I gave them my ACCA membership certificate and the transcript and the degree from OBU. So that covered that aspect because they were able to verify everything online. For my employment aspect, I provided them the initial contract that I had with my employer back in Saudi Arabia, as well as two references individuals. So I gave them email addresses and other contact details of two senior members in the audit firm so that they could contact them directly and verify whatever information or whatever sort of questions they would have. It is quite generic. It's their just recommendation, or they just inquire whether you would actually recommend this individual, or was there anything that could have been risen during their course of employment that could be a problem for the current firm as well and for any future firms. So if you are able to once have a confirmation from your actually managers that they are willing to give that reference, then just make sure that you give them your proper contact details. They'll be able to get in touch. And this is not a process that should take long, but it really depends on your availability on both ends, that whether the firm in the UK is available to do it immediately and the firm back home. And other than that, it would be your own personal documentation, in which first most important thing would be your passport, your residency card or your national ID card of whatever country you live in.
Mhm.
You could provide your residency contract as well, or your property details where you are currently residing, or proper address. You could provide them some other details as well regarding your insurance, but that's not really necessary. But your
Mhm.
passport, your ID card, and your proof of address is the three major things that is quite critical.
Cool. I think on references, don't just assume as a kind of a formality, because I know they actually call and email different individuals to actually cross check what they think about you. They send a questionnaire. I know somebody gave my name as a reference back in time, and I actually received emails from different security agencies talking about an individual filling a form. So it's definitely happening.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
just don't kind of ignore or give anybody's name. It's
Yeah, yeah,
really
absolutely.
important.
The most important thing is actually make sure that you get a confirmation from your manager that they are willing to give that reference,
Yeah.
rather than just surprising them at the end and the process being quite prolonged. Because, like I said, that they could ask just generic things, but the thing is, the answer really does matter. If it's just they're fine, it doesn't matter, it's okay. So they would be thinking that there could be a probable reason why that sort of reply was not given to the email, letter, call. So it is quite important.
Yeah, give your best contacts, I guess. In that case, senior best contacts
Absolutely.
you have available over there. All right. Now we have done through the COS part, and then we talked about the IELTS, we talked about TB, and then we talked about the security checks. Now it's time about the application itself. So in the application, how long it takes to get an appointment? I'll talk about Saudi where you applied from. I know it just varies different times of the year. Sometimes it's quite tight. Sometimes it's you get appointment next day as well. So how it was looking in Saudi Arabia?
Oh, it was quite flexible over here. We were able to get time for the next day, the day after, and you had a flexibility of getting a good time as well. If you would like it early morning, if you would like to take it during your lunch break so that you can manage your work as well as go for the appointment. So there is a good flexibility in getting the appointments done. It's everything online. When you create your application, you'll be able to see that when you can get appointment for the VFS itself.
Cool. And the about the application, one more question before we go on the visa itself. So the maintenance part, we talk about the maintenance. I know at least before firms do the maintenance for the employees, for the families as well. They write that into the COS itself, so there's no legal requirement to provide any bank statements or anything at all. But what if there's nothing from the firm itself? They don't want to certify your maintenance. So what do you think are the requirements then?
Absolutely. So if on the cost it's not written that the maintenance will be provided, that means you are required to show a bank statement for 1 month at least, covering that sort of certain amount. Now, this will actually depend on which city or which location you're living in. If you're moving to a firm which is based in London, automatically your bank statement needs to be maintained for a bit of higher margin amount. That could roughly be, if you look at the exact figures, there are there, but what if I remember is it's going to be £1,000 and some other pounds as well. So it could be like 1,036 pounds or something, but a bit more. But if your firm is based outside of London, then that sort of decreases and goes to £989 approximately. So you would be required to show that you have this much source of income in your
Yeah.
bank account for more than 30 days. So
Yeah.
it cannot be less than 30 days in any condition. I know some people really would like to just go for that 28 days period, but that's absolutely not safe to show because it is clearly mentioned it should be more than 28 days. So if you could show for a complete month, go for 30 days period and show a bank statement that could be completely indicating that you have that amount in your bank, you won't face any issue at all.
Cool. Always safe to give more than less. If you have three
Absolutely.
months, go for it. There's no problem with that. Now the application part itself, the visa application is quite quick to fill. Pumps to help with that. I know the immigration teams are really helpful, helping you to work through that. And I don't think there are any questions. Probably some elements I can highlight, and then you can add in as well. It's probably your travel history. You need to add in like the correct history of your traveling. You need to make sure your details of your parents are fine exactly as they are in their CNIC or any national identity card. You need to make sure the details as well as COS are matching with the application. And if there's any history of rejection for any visit visa or anything, you need to make sure everything is written properly and as indicated by your immigration advisor that you're just not missing anything. Don't avoid or don't try to think that the immigration team won't know my old history. They know everything already before you even apply. So make sure everything is there. Uh, can you? I think probably these are the basic things I have done my application a few years back now. So if you can add anything else that you remember from your experience.
Absolutely. All the elements that you mentioned are for sure very critical. You could also just add, if you would like to, whatever document you actually sent to your employer as well. So all those sort of degrees in your education document, so that you can even show that you are fully again um, on that sort of skills and level that you are capable to go and do that job, so that that aspect is also covered. If you feel like there are some problems in your application, again, any rejection in the past or any inconsistency that could make the application weak, I would always recommend writing a cover letter. It doesn't need to be 10 to 15 pages long. You could just have one page, just identify, okay, I had a rejection in the past, this was the clear reason, and make sure that if there is any sort of these rejections, actually put the original rejection letter in the application. That is actually very important, because sometimes people claim that they don't have it, that maybe the email's lost, they don't have that information. That excuse is not going to work with them, because for them that information will pop up immediately the moment your passport, all your details are put in. Like you mentioned, make sure all of the details are very correct. Any mistake even in the passport number would actually make your application fail this way, because those are the critical things that they're going to look into. Make sure that if you are, like, in my case, I was living in Saudi Arabia on an ikama, so I had to give them the proof that in the country that I'm currently situated, I am a resident and I can legally live here. So I had to give my ikama and the original translation that was actually properly notarized in English as well. So make sure
Yeah.
that you have that sort of translation, original document scanned and uploaded on your portal as well.
Yeah, I guess that's an important point as well. You need to have the documents in English. If not, then you need to have the kind of certified, notarized
Yeah.
documents because they don't accept anything else without that. Now, the part about application, I think it's quite easy. You just upload the documents nowadays, system based. You don't really need to give the bunch of documents to the immigration team or visa processing team. Just upload them in system at home, and it's good to go. Just go for the fingerprints scanning, and you should
Yes.
be good to go as well. The cover letter is quite an important point. It's not too. really required a lot of times for the skilled worker visa because the case is pretty much simple. You got a sponsorship, but it's really important for a lot of visas. I did that for a kind of dependent partner visa recently. I had to write everything down, what's not, what's there, what's
Absolutely.
not,
Yes.
and they approve visa in one day. So it just sets out the direction, the tone of what's happening, what documents are
Exactly.
involved, and why they're there. So it just gives a kind of, you don't want to give home officer any reason to reject you. Just give everything you
Absolutely.
have. Cool. And talking about the after applying, how long it takes, or at least took you to receive the visa decision?
On average, it should take the now because the processing has improved a lot and the timeline is taking less. So if you would go to the VFS, they would say it would take 3 weeks. And that is actually the average time that nowadays I've seen application being approved. So even back in January when I applied for my visa, in 3 weeks I was able to receive the answer. You if again your case is quite straightforward, you could receive it in a week, you could receive in few days. If they feel like there's any sort of complication, maybe some documentation that they need to review, or furthermore it could take more than a month,
Yeah.
but maximum it should not take more than 1.5 months, 2 months. If there is that sort of issue that it goes a bit above, you could always reach out to your immigration advisors back at your firm to just let them know that there's sort of like a delay, or you could even email the UKVI itself that you would like to get to know about what's the status of the application, or maybe it could be escalated. But on average, 3 weeks is what the processing time has been nowadays.
Yeah. I think just about the visa itself, I don't think that the UK VI actually responds on if you don't have any issues with the application. If they haven't requested any further information, typically they don't give you a status for application like where it
Exactly.
is.
Yeah.
It's just you have to wait. There's no other way around it.
Yeah.
Unless they found some issues, they emailed you, and then of course there's a follow-up chain that can happen. But without that, it's just a wait game. I know recent, and I think we are talking about skilled worker visa only, but these are the fastest visa, one of the fastest visas the
Absolutely.
UKVI actually processes. Other visas pretty much take a lot of time than this one, which is quite good when it comes to jobs. No, we received the visa now. I think we'll quickly conclude on this. So once the visa is there, how long we have to arrive in UK? What's the validity period of the visa?
So you have a 90-day period in which you can travel within to the country. So for my case, when I got the visa, so I had a period from February till end of May to travel within the country. This actually would be based on the sticker or the visa that they're going to be putting in into your passport. That is not your residency permit. That's not your BRP. It's just showing that you can travel into the country within this duration. And it is best to travel within that, because if you miss out that sort of timeline and you travel after that, you would be required to pay some fines on it, and they would actually have to reissue that sort of sticker again to allow you to travel within that country. So that timeline is quite critical. And again, I think 90 days is a very big flexibility. I remember there used to be a time it used to be 30 days. You had to
Yeah,
travel like within a month.
it was my
But
time.
now, oh, so I think this is after COVID, they made it 90 days
Yeah,
now. And I think it's the same case even as of right now. People who are
yeah,
applying, so they have 90 days, so you have a well amount of time to travel and plan everything how you would like to make the relocation. So 90 days it is.
yeah. And I think just to highlight for people that the dates, the start date doesn't actually match with what you propose to be in your application all the times. It can
Absolutely.
change. It depends on the decision, of course, but it's not too far, like 1 month away. It's probably one
Yeah.
week, 2 weeks earlier or later from that one. All right. Now, I think we pretty much covered the whole process of visa. The last part is arriving in the UK and getting your BRP. So, what does it look like?
So when you're actually filling out your application, they would ask you where you would like your BRP to be posted. So you could give an address that is closer to any residency that you would know that you're going to stay for the first few months. You could give a post address that's quite close to your office. So in my case, I gave the one that was very close to my office because I knew that that would be a location I would be traveling every day to just go and collect it. So when you're all done with that, you get your visa back. You would be getting an email that would be your BRP letter that would say, okay, this is the location of your BRP. It will be issued within 2 to 3 weeks of your date of visa. You could just go and make sure you have the copy of that BRP with you. Make sure it's actually physical hard copy that you have. Even if you have it on email, that's not a problem, but make sure it is actually a physical hard copy. That's much better. You have your original passport with you, on which you have the sticker and all your other relevant documentation, especially which would provide your proof of identification, so that you can tell them this is your name, this is your full passport number, and this is the BRP that you're going to collect.
And
So
I
it's
guess
a
the
very
post
straightforward
office
process.
does ask for the your address as well nowadays to record in
Yes, they
to
are
put in the
starting to
records.
ask it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but if you don't have a permanent accommodation, you could still give them the address of your office, because at least that way you won't have any mistakes of losing your address or your post that could come in from them directly.
Awesome. I guess we covered it pretty well. From start to end, what does it look like for job? It's a 1 month process at minimum, including everything, and
Yes,
can take 2 to 3 months depending on the issues you encounter with you don't have sufficient documentation or anything at home office port or any wars happening in the world. Just it can happen
absolutely.
and anything can happen, but typically one month on average. Historically, used to be 2 months just because this US was issued on first week of each month, so we had to wait essentially for another month to get started. uh, I guess that has been helpful. Thank you so much. Anything else that we missed that you want to share?
Just make sure that when you're filling out the application, say points we mentioned earlier, that no information is being missed out, because that is something people do end up making a mistake. And I've seen multiple times people reaching out that I made a mistake in the application. What can I do to rectify? Because once you submit the application, especially the one that's on the UKVI website, you can't make changes to it.
Yeah.
You can only either give a cover letter to state that, okay, this mistake was made and we want to just give you the correct information. So just make sure that in a rush of completed things, don't miss out important key details. Just have a good thorough review twice of the application, whatever letters you're sending. And if you have any issue, make sure that your HR team is in the loop of the whole procedure. The day you submit your passport for the visa, your BRPs, you get a BRP letter or any documentation process that goes on, make sure that the HR is also aware of that, so that if there is any problem, they are able to actually help you or maybe guide you what could be the next possible step. And just try to be as clear on your application as possible. There's no need to miss out anything, and there's also no need to overstate on the documentation side itself. Just make sure it's a clear application with all the essential documentation. And again, for the IELTS as well, to be very careful that you're required to give general IELTS for UKVI, not the regular one, because your application then would be simply rejected. And we have seen cases as well that because you're not giving that sort of specific IELTS, they end up rejecting the application.
Oh, cool. Awesome. I think we missed on the cost part. Probably we can touch a bit. I don't know the latest numbers. Probably if you can guide people.
Okay, I think it would be an estimate, so I can definitely tell that it would depend firstly on the term of your visa. So if it's a 3-year visa, the cost could approximately touch um, to almost 3,000. This depends on both things. Your IHS cost, that
Which
would
is
be
eight
for
six
your.
hundred twenty three per year, right?
Yes,
1800 around.
absolutely. It's almost around that. And then your the application form, and sometimes what happens is in Saudi Arabia as well, you are required to sometimes pay some additional costs for the VFS location. It's because it's a special center that's been opened, so they charge sometimes some service fees. But overall, it could be covered around £3,000, which most of the times the firms do reimburse. But just make sure that you have your numbers correct, and the numbers are always updated on the website. You can easily go and search that. If it's a 3-year visa, how much the cost would be, if it's 4 year, if it's 5 years, and it does make a difference. And even if it's a 1-year visa, the cost would be quite different than to what it would look like for 2 to 3 years. If it's 5 year, I believe it is a bit more cheaper if you would make the same payment if you're making for a visa for 3 years. But mostly, most firms do prefer to go for the 3-year
3 year.
tenure and then later on extend it.
Yeah. Awesome. That's the visa part. The fees part, I guess. Yeah. The fees are IHS, which is a major part. Application fees, IELTS fees. Not a lot of fee when it comes to IELTS. Probably historically used to be 30,000 PKR 4 years back. I don't know right now, but it's not a lot. TB test doesn't cost a lot. It's quite cheap as well. So and firms do reimburse. Some of them do reimburse. Some don't. Just
Yes, it
depends on
depends.
where you apply as well. All right. I guess that has been helpful. Yeah, I guess that will give a lot of information to a lot of people. about what to look forward to when it comes to application. The last point I would probably mention, then we will close off, is don't make the mistake of having slightly different names as well in different documents. That really
Yeah.
triggers a lot of issues. Your NIC should be consistent with your passport, with your IELTS certificate, with your TB certificate. First name, middle name, last name, make sure it's consistent across. Otherwise, it's going to be a trouble, because name is the first thing they really look into. Why doesn't is not matching with the other stuff as well, which does create trouble. And the other thing is the address. That's usually you need to provide something when filling the application. So that
Yeah.
can be a temporary address. They don't really care a lot when it comes to skilled worker application, because some firms may provide the accommodation which is temporary, or you may have your relatives, friends, for some address for where you will be living. So that's all in this video, I guess. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.